Episode 14.
All right. Hey, welcome to the Gotta Have Miami show. This is episode 14. And as promised, we're going to discuss something that has been really a topic for over 20 years, 21, 22 years. And behind us, what you see is an old sign post that used to be a for sale sign for all of these lots that you see around Coconut Grove, especially on Grand Avenue, and a little bit of historical content. Grand Avenue back in the day was known as County Road.
County Road, okay.
Which is going to be one of the issues that a lot of folks have that have run into it, is that when people say, oh, let's fix these roads or let's fix that, this is city property, the road is county property. And that happens more often than you think. But again, don't want to get off topic, but we're going to be talking about West Coconut Grove's vacant lots that you see as you're driving down Grand Avenue between McDonald and 37. It's been this way probably for over 20 years, kind of dates back to the early 2000s, and we'll get into that really quick. But before we get into this whole show, before we get into this topic, I got to give Ash some time for her to be able to
vent. I'm venting.
She needs to vent a little bit about what the condo people are doing to you.
I have complaints about condos again.
Do you?
So when you get financed for a condo, the bank is going to send a questionnaire to the condo, and it has a bunch of questions that banks want to know about before they provide financing for that unit. And one of the questions is a new question that was recently added onto these guidelines.
Absolutely.
Trickle down effect from Surfside. Definitely halting me.
Yes.
So, you know, they answered the whole questionnaire except this new question, likely because the condo doesn't know exactly how to answer the question because it's never been asked before. But all of that means is that my buyers have not closed yet, and we don't know when we're going to close, and we're all stressed out.
You'll close.
So,
if you're not, we've talked about it briefly in a couple of other shows, is effective in January, Fannie and Freddie put out some new laws, and they actually added some questions into the questionnaires for Fannie and Freddie backed mortgages.
Yeah.
And a lot of the associations are not prepared for it. They don't even know that it's there because it's a new requirement, and they'll say, hey, we just closed on an apartment or a unit
a couple months ago.
And
right.
why is this a new thing? So
right.
It's very difficult, and it's just a process, and no one wants to tell you anything, and hopefully it'll all change soon, but yes, that's how it is.
And all I could think to myself is if we were a year from now, theoretically, we would just be able to go onto a portal and answer this question for ourselves. So
that's going to be happening.
It's going to be a good time for realtors next year in the condo market.
It's going to happen soon. So now that you've vented out and you're okay, a little bit better?
Yes, I feel better. Okay. Tell us, I know that most people that live in Miami have driven down Grand Avenue on their way to Coco Walk to have a nice dinner and say to themselves, what is going on here?
What's going on here? So, like I said, this area of Coconut Grove was always known as Coconut Grove. We started to name it Village West, West Grove. It was almost a way for the real estate market to be able to give it some kind of identity.
Right.
But one of the realities was, and I mentioned this on the tease of Friday, is up until, well, I'm going to go back further back. So what you see here, this has been an ongoing issue for many, many years. Back in the late 40s.
1940s,
way back in the day, Coconut Grove, West Grove didn't even have running water.
Right.
And they used to work with privies, which was like private little toilets, and you pumped well water out. But one of the bad things about it was that the privies were right next door to the well water, and a lot of times you got contamination. So back in the late 40s, a group of very prominent folks from Village West created a committee. It was, I think, the Coconut Grove Slum Clearance Committee.
Right.
And really what it was is to bring in water, municipal water into the Village West, and also at the same time get rid of the privies so that they would be more suitable for use. And so this is not something new. Now what you're seeing behind us is all of these vacant lots that are going through just the same thing, just a very dormant standpoint. And it's a very complex issue, but what you're going to learn, hopefully, stay tuned, what you're going to learn is that the more things change, the more it stays the same, and the more that you see things going on, it's still the same players over and over again. So from a historical standpoint, I got into real estate in 2001, and when I was here in Coconut Grove, And one of the things that we heard was that the Blumenthal family was selling all of their 89 properties because they had been sued for lead-based paint. And as the old saying says, once you've been sued once, you're going to be sued again. And so they got rid of all of their properties, and they put them all out on the market. We that were just starting out or in the industry said, oh wow, this is really going to change Village West. What you're seeing is all these vacant lots is actually, you're seeing a lot of that remnant. The only problem is it's 2022.
Right.
So none of these things went out. But once the Blumenthal family put it on the market, and they put it out with a local real estate agent, actually you can even see like the old listings and all that stuff, is that it went to market, and a group of very, very prominent local builders wanted the property, and the property at the time was valued at $8 million.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. And we'll get into the worth of these properties and some other, little technicalities as we get into it. But it was worth about $8 million. The group and their appraisal only came up with a $5.5 million offer.
Okay.
Because that's what they felt the properties were worth. Everybody now realizes that was a huge mistake, but it was also 2002. It wasn't that long ago, 2003. Right. So a company came in and bought out a lot of the properties that were on the market from the Blumenthal. It was called, I think, the Grove Grand Development Corp or Development Corp. And we're going to get into more of the ownership as we go through. But a group bought these properties, and then a secondary group came in behind and bought the residentials. So unfortunately you can't see it, and we're not talented enough to show you, but where we're sitting is we're sitting on commercial property. We're sitting on frontages that really don't have enough depth to be able to build what it's zoned for, and that's been one of the challenges to be able to build here. So you needed to pick up the residential properties that are actually in front of us or behind us. So when you look at Grand Avenue and you're driving through it, you're going to see all the frontage. That's all the commercial. Most of it is zone T5, so you can go to 5 stories.
Right.
One of them is zone T8, which is another conversation. But the backs are all T3 are residential, so you would have to upzone them to give some kind of thing. So that's been one of the challenges to get this property developed. So when this whole thing was going down, we had a group of individuals. It was Point Group that came up with it, and they're still around. And they came up with a Grove Village, which consisted of how many units?
6.
6.
I know them: Bimini, Freeport, Nassau, Abaco,
Grand
Bahama,
Paradise,
and Paradise Island.
There you go. We got all 6 of them. A little assist there from so we got all of those, and they were. It was a concept which earlier I called it the Bahamian Village because some people called it that too. It was actually Grove Village.
Right.
The big proposal was put out there, and it was interesting because at the time you had all of these buildings that were going to be built out with, I think it was 145,000 square feet of retail. 400 and something, 8,000
office space.
Of Class A office space. But the interesting part is only contained 165 units of residential.
But I think that was also drawn up in a point in time where it was more, maybe not more important, but it was important to have office space because it was utilized more. I mean, in today's market, residential housing is more necessary than more commercial space.
And one of the realities too is commercial is always going to offer you more money, more bang for the buck than residential, because the residential wasn't really going to be sort of what they call affordable. It was going to be market rate residential. And at the time in 2000, you figure that a one bedroom would go maybe for $1,200, $1,300 as opposed to 26 in today's market. So I think that was the theory of it. But it was a beautiful plan. It was a great plan that was going to be rolled out. It had the zoning for it, and it still has something called a MUS, which is a Master Use Special Permit. And we'll talk a little bit more about the MUS as we get into our next episode. But the MUS actually allows you to do different zonings, a bigger project. Right now they call them SAPs, Special Area Permits. So they've changed the names of it, but this MUS is still in place, and it was put out in the early 2000s as a zoning element so that the builders could be able to build out this project in the capacity that they envisioned.
Right.
So currently there are, in just this general area, there are about 79, 80 properties that are vacant between commercial corridor, which is on the Grand Avenue, and then the residential on the back. And the interesting part is most of the properties are still owned by the same folks that owned them back when this whole project started in 2002.
20 years ago.
Now, there's going to be a lot of rigmarole, and we're going to get to that rigmarole, because one of the realities was why this project didn't roll out outside of some neighborhood opposition. Some of the original builders wanted this to be 12 stories, be a bigger project.
Obviously, the residents didn't want that.
Right, and one of the things you got to realize is here in this part of town, if you go over 8 stories, you can actually see the bay, so you can see the water.
Oof.
And once you go a little bit higher, you'll get more bang for the buck. But the residents opposed it. They kept it to the T5 and that one T8. But another reality too was we had the recession. We had our 2009 recession, and that really put everything to a halt. And that's when it really gets really interesting and a lot of fun. That's when you get all of the schemes and all of the plans and everything after 2009, when you have corporations closing, LLCs changing, LLCs merging, you have all of this wheeling dealing, you have lawsuits, you have people losing the property to bankruptcy.
We call this business.
Business, or this is what we call Miami. This is what we really call Miami.
Miami business.
Yeah, so again, to give you kind of a recap, 2000, early 2000s, Blumenthal family starts to let go of 89 properties. A group backed up by a gentleman by Benitez, Morero, and Muscat picks up a lot of these properties. Point Group picks up the back. Legend has it that what they were doing was lease options, basically paying taxes for the properties. And again, if you go around here, you'll see that some still exist behind us. There's actually properties that would be part of that must that are not selling, and they're going to stay there. So we go to 2005, 2006, the zoning comes out for Grove Villages. Everything's kind of moving forward, everybody's kind of excited about it, and then bam, 2009, the recession hits.
Paused.
Nothing happens till 2012, 13, and we're going to leave it at that.
Because it's a long story.
It's a long story, and it gets more interesting now, because 2022, still nothing has been built here. Nothing is going to be built here
anytime soon.
Because we have something called, something out there called the CRA, but recently we even changed redistricting.
Right.
And we went through this whole thing, it'll be interesting. We'll have a good story for you on Friday. And again, a lot of this stuff you can find public records. It's very for us, it's very common to find it, very easy to find it.
Yeah,
so
Google.
Do you want to add something for our closing, or I think we're good to go?
Well, I mean, you've given us all those details. I like to put this in real layman's terms, because you're so technical. He knows all the names and everything. So the gist of it is that the developers want to develop this, and what they want to develop, the residents have provided pushback. Then merge that with the 2009 recession, and here we are 2022, nothing's happened.
And then you've got multiple developers with multiple visions that are now in ownership of these properties.
I mean, the vision was to keep this as West Grove with that Caribbean, Bahamian feel. I've looked at the pictures of what was proposed before. It looked very much like Key Westy, Nassau-y, vibe.
Very similar to the Gibson Plaza.
Right, Gibson, is that the, right there? You guys could come visit. It's on Plaza and Grand, right there. So the idea was to keep that vibe and keep it low.
Low scale.
Residents wanted the buildings to be lower. They didn't want the 12 stories because it casts a shadow and it blocks the sun and all of that.
And the natural breezes that are more common.
Yes, I read that one of the residents way back 20 years ago was saying she wants the buildings to stay low because of that sea breeze, because they built up Bayshore Drive, and she says she lost that sea breeze she used to get as a child, although it's still windy out here.
It is. It's windy out here today, but again, you get a lot. But also look at all the open spaces. You don't have any buildings here at the moment.
Right.
So I think Ash, you're right. The takeaway is this wants to be developed, but there are so many challenges in the development, and then we're going to get into the cost of these properties. And I'm going to jump up a little bit, and we're going to tease the next show. So the sign you see behind you used to be a sign for sale for all of these vacant lots. Not all of them, because some of these actually were owned already prior from this earlier inception. But they wanted the properties, they wanted $30 million for the lots that they had available. And I think at that time, I want to say it was like 30-something lots.
Right.
So those, and I'll correct that in the next show, but they wanted $30 million. It bumped it up to $35 million simply because you could. So this was really solely a land play by one of the original groups that bought this. There was really not that much of intent to build it out, as opposed to one of the other groups that really was pushing for a build out. So that's about it right now.
Yeah.
So we're sitting on about $35 million worth of land.
Nothing here.
You got the cash, come on down. The only problem is you won't be able to build what you think you will be able to build,
Right.
because the zoning allows only X amount.
Right. So the numbers don't make sense at 35 million.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit on the next. We'll talk about it now just to kill a little bit of time. But when all of this shook out, and I was chair of the village council, I actually came up with an idea and a proposal, and we actually went to the folks that were at $30 million at the time, and for us to be able to build affordable housing here. And I wasn't part of the deal. I had no skin in the game, nothing. I was just trying to see if, as a leadership position, we could actually get something going and talking on the table. And I sat down with the District 7 Commissioner at the time, Xavier Suarez, and also with Pinnacle Group, that is a
Builder?
Builder, but basically affordable housing builder.
Oh, affordable
Who knew
housing
the crowds. And
Right.
the most that we could pay with government subsidies to be able to do affordable housing in this area was $18 million, $17 to $18 million. So we were behind the 8 ball by $12, $13 million from the get-go.
Right.
Because for affordable housing at the time, you had to buy the door. A door meaning that if the building has 150 units, you have 150 doors. So that you had to buy those doors right around 25, 23K, 24K
Right.
to be able to build that affordable. And the affordability. The doors were being sold at 70, 80K.
Right.
So there was no
More
way
than
that
double.
so there was no way we would do it. So this is an ongoing saga. It is a complex story.
Very.
And what I wanted to do is just kind of show you, first of all, how we got here. And now we're going to show you where we are on Friday in the next episode. We're going to probably take it from a different location. But just remember that these vacant lots all have a story. It is a very, very complex story. It's a very interesting story. And next series, we're going to get to the schemers and the dreamers and
the
posers.
cheese.
Yeah, we're going to get to the cheese. So thank you for stopping by. Anything else?
No, that's all. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.
Well, take it easy. Have a good one, guys.
Bye.